In this video, I'm going to talk about a very basic setup for Ableton Live, and also I'll use that setup to perform a introductory MIDI recording and to play it back. So the first thing that you probably always need to do when you launch Ableton is you need to go to the Live menu and choose Settings. And the reason why you have to do this is because on the Audio tab, there's an audio output device. So normally you always want to have some kind of audio output, whether that be speakers or your headset. You have to make sure it's chosen. I wish it was chosen by default because when I first got Ableton, I didn't know why I couldn't hear what I was playing, and it took me a little while to figure that out. So I will choose MacBook speakers. If you look a little more closely at the detail that appears after you choose your output, you'll notice here that you've got a sample rate, and it also's got some information about latency as well. And the goal that you ideally want to strive for is to have a latency of somewhere between 10 to 15 milliseconds. And I've got mine down to about 12.7 milliseconds. And you may say, well, what is latency? Latency is the lag between the time the audio or MIDI is triggered and the time it is recorded. And if you have too big of a lag, you're going to notice a big delay by the time it actually gets recorded, and that will be noticeable and also irritating because you're not hearing that recording in real time. It's going to be having this little bit of a delay. So you want to minimize that delay as much as possible. And the way to do that is you want to choose a sample rate of 44 kilohertz or 48 kilohertz. Either is just fine, and it's said to be acceptable for most normal people like me and most of you who really can't hear more detail than that many samples per second. So in this case, it's 48,000 samples per second that will be recorded. And the reason why you want to keep that number relatively low and manageable is because higher rates are going to demand more processing speed and more storage space, and it will get exponentially more difficult for your computer to keep up, and your latency will go up as well. So most people who are recording at home and in most recording situations are going to be using 4800 or 4400 kilohertz. Now you may wonder, well, what's the difference between 44 and 48 kilohertz? The answer is not much. The Sony, when CDs were developed, had come out with this sample rate of 44.1 kilohertz. And since then, when digital video emerged and different standards emerged for digital video, 48 kilohertz became the more common standard. So they're very close, and most of us would not be able to tell the difference. So whatever you do, stick to one, and that should work, and most people won't know the difference. Most of us don't have machines that are going to let us enjoy higher sample rates, but I've never worried about that or ever felt that it was an issue. Now, the other thing is you can choose the number of samples that you want to store in your buffer, and you may adjust this to affect your latency, and you can go up and down to see how that's going to affect this overall number. So let's see here what happens. So if I choose to buffer more samples and have those stored in quick access memory, random memory, you'll notice that my latency actually goes up. So it seems to me that if I lower it, I get a more acceptable latency amount. This view that we're looking at here is the timeline. It's also called the arrangement view, and it allows us to lay out all of our clips and tracks so that they play out in a sequential manner, and that way you can organize the song from start to finish. But we also have another view. If you hit the tab key, it will bring you into the session view. And this allows you to start to create different sections of the song, and you can move the song sections around with ease, cut, copy, paste, move, and that will allow you to figure out the arrangement of the song before you actually place it in a timeline. So I find this very handy. So for the next couple weeks, I'm going to work in here most of the time, and I actually really like this view the most, actually. So I use it a lot, but I want to start here today with it. So I'm going to record in this area as well. Another thing that you may want to do at all times when getting used to working with Ableton is making sure that you've clicked the information icon here. And what that will do is it will give you this description for every control that you hover over, and it will describe the function of the control and help you understand how Ableton works a little bit better. You don't need to have this, but it is helpful if you're trying to navigate your way around Ableton for the first time. So I'm going to be creating a MIDI track. I'm not going to be recording live audio. I'm going to be using my MIDI controller. So my piano keyboard controller that I'm going to be playing through. And one of the things that I need to do is I need to check the input of my track. So this vertical space here is a track, and I need to choose my controller, and I'm using my Alesis here, so I'm going to choose this one as my output device, and I think I'm good to go. The next thing that I want to do and need to do is I need to choose an instrument or a voice for my MIDI track. And the way you could do that is you can search on the instrument that you want to use. And I actually want the E piano. But here I've got a whole bunch of different pianos, so I could actually audition them. And for this case, I only want to use these results, which have an ADV extension, which is an Ableton device, or an ADG extension, which is a device group. It's a cluster of instruments together. So these are Ableton devices. There's a there's a cluster of different instruments grouped to create one instrument. And the one that I want is E piano basic, and here it is right here. So I'm going to left click and drag that onto my MIDI track here. And that's going to give me a voice for my MIDI track. So um, when I air my recording, I can do that by clicking this icon here. It will turn red. And because I've got a voice, I've got my input selected, and I'm going to use my Alesis keyboard, and I've got the track armed. I can now press keys, and I'll hear output when I press them. I should also mention that hopefully when you went to choose your input device, you saw your MIDI controller listed for your keyboard. Hopefully it was there. If not, it gets a little bit tricky because every device is different. Usually they'll just install the drivers automatically once you plug it in, and that's the dream. Hopefully it worked for you. And every situation could be different, so I can't say exactly what you might have seen. But if you go to live settings, and on the settings menu you click on this link tab here, hopefully you see your controller surface. I actually have two that I use. For some reason the same one shows up with different names here, but hopefully you see that. And if you don't, please check to make sure that your MIDI controller is plugged into your machine. You may have to install some drivers to get it working on your machine. Now that I have everything configured, I want to make a couple other adjustments here, and I'm going to make a slight adjustment to the tempo. So I've made it so that it's 85 beats per minute, and I'm going to turn on the metronome. And I'm going to record something into this clip right here. So this is the track. This vertical area is a track. and this is a clip right here. And I'm going to create a clip of MIDI with this voicing for e-piano, and I'm going to record Mary Had a Little Lamb. And I'm only going to do it on white keys. Going to keep it super simple and just play on the white keys here. And I'm going to try and play it to the quarter notes that play. So I'm going to click on this clip slot here, this round area, which will start the recording. It will count in. It counts in at 1 bar right here. You can set how many beats you want to count in. So in 4/4 time, it's 4 beats per bar. So it's going to count 4 beats and then start. So now that I've created my MIDI recording, I can go in and edit it. And if I use the plus key, when I've clicked into this note area, notice that I've selected the notes tab. I click the plus key, I can zoom in, and I can see just how badly my timing alignment is, and I can edit it accordingly. And minus sign will zoom out here. So another thing that is possible is if you hover over the left area, you'll get a magnifying glass which you can click, and it will give you a more defined look of the piano roll here. And you can also expand the area to get a better look and see what the keys are on the piano roll. And here I'll have a better idea of how to edit my notes. Right now I just want to make sure that they line up with the beats. So each of these sections here represents a different beat, and I want to have it at the start of the beat, which is a quarter note. And you can actually automate the quantization as well. It doesn't always work great, but there's alternatives to doing it manually, but it's good to know both because there's no perfect way, however you look at it. And in any case, I'll go through and I'll finish adjusting my notes in a similar manner. You'll notice down here in the bottom, we've got this area called velocity, which is tracking the pressure that I use to press for each key. And the range is between 0 and 127. And the loudest, fullest velocity is the fullest pressure at 127, and no pressure is 0. So these will all range between 0 and 127. And so maybe some keys sound a little bit too loud. I could lower the velocity. Some sound too soft. I can increase them. You'll also notice the color will change. It will become more dark as the velocity decreases. The ability to edit the notes is fantastic. It allows everybody a chance to go in and make their performance sound better. Too much automation can take away from that human feel and actually make your music sound more like a robot and make it sound predictable, and that's also not good. So try to find the happy medium between editing your takes but also not over editing to make it destroy that human feel. I've finished aligning the notes to the start of each of the quarter notes here, and I'm going to start playing it back, and I'm going to let it loop and show off some of the other features. Okay, so I think maybe, whoops, I'll get rid of that. You'll notice that it loops right here after the 8th bar, and it starts again. I could disable looping, although I don't want to this time, but I could disable it by clicking on this, and when it's grayed out, it will not repeat. This is the loop brace. You can shorten it, you can increase the length as well to create a longer track if you want, or a longer clip, and um, that will set the region that actually loops. So you don't have to start at the beginning where your MIDI notes start. You could start anywhere within your MIDI recording for that clip. And I want to also expand this note so that it plays for the entire bar. And so you can drag and extend it if you want. You could shorten it as well. A couple other things to notice are you have this volume fader for the individual track. And here's the master fader, which it'll lower and raise the output of all the tracks combined at once, but you have the ability to adjust the relative volume of each of the tracks with the individual fader for the track as well. This is reverb, and that's added to every track by default. Reverb is an emulation of sound reflection, and if there are a lot of objects in the room where the walls are reflecting the sound, we get a very wet atmosphere, and that's what reverb is. It creates a softer sound. It softens the original audio, and it makes it sometimes sound very nice. So turn up the reverb here, and you can right away hear that sound reflection. In big halls and big rooms, or stadiums, you might also get a slapback, and we also have this delay which can create a kind of like an echo effect where the sound will travel across the stadium, across the big hall, and it will hit the back of the wall and bounce back to the listener. Also, one thing that you may want to do is turn off that metronome when you're listening to the audio. Those are the basics for setting up Ableton to record, to actually do the recording, and then to play back and adjust some of the volumes and some basic effects. I hope that's a good start for you, and I look forward to looking at other exciting features of Ableton with you throughout this entire course, but I hope this is a good way to start. Thank you.